Hello, I'm Michelle Makori in New York, and I am pleased to welcome to the show one of the staunchest advocates for political and economic freedom, personal responsibility, and smaller government, and a very vocal opponent of authoritarian restrictions. Maxime Bernier is the leader and founder of the People's Party of Canada. He was a former Conservative Member of Parliament and Cabinet Minister under Prime Minister Stephen Harper. He served as Minister of Industry, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Minister of Small Business, Tourism and Agriculture. Prior to politics, he held senior positions in law, finance, and business, including as Executive Vice President of the Montreal Economic Institute. And now he is affectionately called Mad Max for his bold candor and relentless outspokenness against the establishment. And he's joining us now to weigh in with that candor on a range of topics, from inflation to fertilizer to gold to pronouns. Maxime, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm very pleased to be with you, Michelle. Thank you very much for having me.
All right, for our American viewers that may not be that familiar with you, why don't we start off with an overview of who you are? And perhaps a good way to do that is by the nickname that you've embraced, which, as I said, is Mad Max. Does that encapsulate who you are?
First, that started when I was running for the leadership of the Conservative Party in Canada in 2017, and journalists were saying at that time and calling me Mad Max. And I said, yes, I believe that you're right, because I'm mad about the policies coming from our Canadian governments with more spending and also trying to always do more regulations and risk our freedom and our rights were violated. So I said, yes, I believe I have a reason to be mad. And I used that nickname, Mad Max. And actually, as you know, I didn't win the leadership with 49% of the vote. And that's why after that, I was mad about the Conservative Party of Canada because, I was running on a very strong conservative free market platform, and it was popular with the membership of the Conservative Party of Canada. But after 13 months, Andrew Scheer was the leader of the Conservative Party at that time, and he told me the truth. He was very honest. And he said, Maxime, your ideas were very popular with the membership, but we are going to an election in 2019 in a couple of months, and your ideas are not popular with the general population. So we won't take any of your ideas for our electoral platform. And after that, I resigned, and I said the Conservative Party of Canada is intellectually and morally corrupt because they don't promote conservative ideas, and we created the People's Party of Canada in 2018.
All right, that does give our viewers a nice overview. I want to now focus on some of the economic issues which you've been vocal about. And of course, as I mentioned, you have a strong background in business and economics. And I want to focus on inflation. US CPI for July recently out, rising at 8.5% from a year ago. And the intense pace of inflation did slow down in July for the first time in months, but prices still near their highest level in 40 years. Canada's annual inflation rate at 8.1% in June. Canada, the US, seeing very similar issues and similar responses by government when it comes to inflation, putting the blame mostly on supply chain issues or the conflict in Ukraine, and not really addressing the money printing or the expansion of the money supply, not addressing the unprecedented fiscal and monetary stimulus. So what do you think are the real causes of inflation?
But, during the last 2 years, I said, that these stimulus coming from your government in US and our government in Canada, I said it is not a stimulus, it is a sedative for the economy. And we have that sedative right now with the huge inflation in Canada and in US. And the reason, you just said it, the reason for that inflation, it's always because of a bad monetary policy. When, the Bank of Canada was the ATM machine for the federal government here in Canada, the federal government in Canada, the last 2 years, spent money that we don't have and created a huge and irresponsible deficit of $450 billion. And that was financed by printing money by the Bank of Canada. And when you do that, when you're creating money out of thin air, you have inflation, and now we have that inflation, like you said, in Canada, 8.1%. And inflation is a tax. Actually, I looked at the data coming from Statistic Canada a month ago, and the average income increase in Canada for this year will be around 5%. So every Canadian will be poorer by 3%. So we have a new 3% tax. So inflation is a tax, and the federal government here in Canada, Trudeau said to Canadians when they created these huge programs for COVID-19 by shutting down the economy and telling people, stay at home, it will be okay, I will give you more money. But that was, there's nothing like a free lunch, and now we are paying for that. So the federal government told us, you can keep your money in your pockets. I won't tax you for creating these programs. But right now we know that the money that we have in our pockets cannot buy the same amount of goods and services. So inflation is a tax, and the problem is central banks, and also the fact that we need to put in order we need to put more order in our budget in Canada and in the US to balance the budget to stop that.
And Maxime, there is still this reluctance, though, by both governments to acknowledge the role of stimulus and money printing here. Milton Friedman once said that inflation is always in every way a monetary phenomenon. In Canada, in the first year of COVID, the money supply as measured by M3 increased an average annual rate of 13.4%, almost double the rate during the preceding 9 years. In the US, by the end of 2021, M3 increased by around 40%. And yet the governments in both countries seem to want to put the focus on supply chain issues. As I mentioned, the war in Russia and Ukraine. So it begs the question, can you control inflation if you're not confronting the real causes?
Yeah, if you're not confronting the real cause, that is the monetary policy, you won't control inflation. You won't be able to control inflation. And actually, they're saying, it's because of the war in Ukraine, it's because of the challenges in the supply chain. But the reality is, when you have the same quantity of money in the economy, or almost the same quantity of money in the economy, a price of a good like gas can go up, but the price of another good will have to go down. So you won't have a general inflation. We have inflation because of bad monetary policy, because of fiat money system. And yes, the way to resolve that, it's first the federal government in Canada and the government in the US must balance the budget. And it's not popular when you're a politician to tell your voters that you will cut the spending and balance the budget. But that's the position of our party. We need to balance the budget. We need to stop spending money that we don't have. And also we need, the Bank of Canada has an inflation target of 2% every year. And now we know the real inflation is about around 8.1%, But the inflation target for the Bank of Canada must be 0%. Like that, we will keep our purchasing power, because inflation, when you have inflation, our purchasing power is going down, our standard of living is going down. It's a debasement of our money. So we need to tell these central bankers to have an inflation target of 0%. And that will be the beginning. But after that, I believe that, we need to have a monetary reset internationally, and having a money that will be more based on gold or other commodities like we had in the 19th century.
Well, you did mention a return to the gold standard before. Before I want to touch on that, I want to get your outlook on the immediate forecast for Canada's economy. How do you see it faring in the next year or so in terms of a recession, in terms of where inflation is going? What's your outlook for the Canadian economy?
Well, I believe, I don't want to see that, but I believe that in Canada, we will be in a recession soon. You are in a recession in the US, and that will happen.
I don't know, they're trying to redefine recession here in the US, Maxime. It's no longer 2 quarters of negative GDP growth, but go on.
Yeah, but for me, it's the old traditional definition. Yeah. So you are in a recession, and we will be in a recession also in Canada. And I believe that we'll have a stagflation. And the Bank of Canada will raise interest rate. Actually, our The rate for coming from the Bank of Canada, it's about 2.5% here in Canada. And I believe that in September, they will raise rate also. And but they won't be able to fight inflation. And usually look at the the last time that we had a huge inflation like that in the 1980s, we had in Canada about maybe an inflation rate of 12%. And the Bank of Canada raised the rate at 19% to stop inflation. So I believe that the Bank of Canada and the Fed won't be able to stop inflation. They would create a bigger recession and will be in a stagflation.
So you don't see either the central bank, the Fed, or the Bank of Canada, either central bank being able to tackle inflation effectively because there's going to be reluctance to go for double-digit interest rate hikes?
Yeah, and also, it will be like after the Second World War, we had inflation there to pay for the debt of the war. So that's the only way to liquidate the debt. And I believe that we'll have inflation, maybe not around 8% all the time, but it will be more than 2% for a couple of years. And because we have huge debt, government debt, private sector debt, individual debt, it's a bubble of all debt. So all that must stop.
All right, well, let's go back to your point about fiat currency and excessive monetary printing, because you've long made the point that constantly creating new money out of thin air reduces purchasing power, debases money, and creates a dramatic increase in prices. And you said back in 2010 that paper money must be based on something. And you wrote an article in the National Post saying that there will need to be a serious debate about returning to the gold standard. I don't know how likely that is. I'm assuming you're still personally in favor of a return to the gold standard?
Well, absolutely, but it will be maybe a kind of a gold standard with commodities or something like that. But I believe that gold will play a role. And, I know that I have some friends that like Bitcoins, and I understand that it can be a nice competition to a fiat money.
But do you think it's realistic for Canada and for the rest of the world to return to some kind of gold standard backing, even if it is as part of a basket of other commodities?
I think it will happen. I think we'll have a monetary reset, and I believe that I don't know when it will happen, but you can see a trend to the de-dollarization right now with Russia and China and India, that they're looking to have a kind of a new currency based on commodities and maybe on gold. So that will happen. I don't know when, but a fiat money system cannot live too long. And after many decades, I believe that with all these debt and all these money printing all across in America and Canada and Europe, that will have to end.
Well, Maxime, if that does happen, it's going to be a problem for the Bank of Canada, considering it's sold off practically all of its gold reserves. According to the World Gold Council, I believe it still holds about 77 ounces of gold, mainly in gold coins. So not necessarily a very good move by the Bank of Canada if we do, in fact, see gold returning to play a bigger role in the global monetary system and or some kind of gold-backed or commodity-backed currencies. But let's focus on this idea of the big reset, the monetary reset that you're forecasting, because that was the theme of an interview that I did with Willem Middelkoop, the author of The Big Reset. And I'm rather flattered because you tweeted out that interview and you said, and I'm quoting you to you, "If you want to know what economic and geopolitical ideas inspire me, watch this fascinating interview about the monetary reset, the war in Ukraine, and between East and West, the US dollar as world reserve currency, gold, Bitcoin, etc." So in that interview, Middelkoop was saying that the dollar will be dethroned as the sole global reserve currency, that there will be a bifurcation of the global monetary system with China leading one side and the US and the West in the other, and that gold will be playing a big role here. So do you agree with that? What is your vision of how this reset plays out?
Yes, I agree with that. Absolutely. The dollar, and we can see right now all across the world that there's a trend for de-dollarization. Like I said, we may have, couple of currency based on gold or commodities that will be in competition. I cannot, that's what I'm saying in the future, but I cannot tell you how it will happen, when it will happen. But, if you look at what is happening and what happened in the past with the fiat money currency, there's always an end to that, and I believe it will come. And I'm not a financial expert on that, but that's why I really enjoy your interview, and I agree with what he said.
Well, thank you. And I'm also inclined to agree with his outlook. But if he is correct, it does not bode very well for the world necessarily. Now, he also said that people should own both Bitcoin and gold. Middle Coop adds that if you don't want to own gold, then you don't understand history. So let's focus on the gold aspect of that quote first. And I'm assuming you agree with that.
Yes, absolutely. And that will be a little bit difficult for us in Canada because, like you said before, our central bank doesn't have any gold reserve. So that will be difficult. So that's why we need the federal government in Ottawa to balance the budget as soon as possible, lower taxes, and try to have surplus to be in a good fiscal position when that will happen.
Right. So where does Bitcoin fit into this picture for you? Middle Coop does have some of his personal portfolio in Bitcoin. He says it could play a role here. What are your views?
Yeah, I believe that it can play a role also. It can be a competition to fiat money. I don't know which role. I believe that, we must encourage more free markets and encourage Bitcoin also, the development of that currency. Personally, I don't have any in my portfolio, but, I'm more a kind of a traditional guy, believing more in a kind of gold standard like we have in the 19th century. And, it was a prosperous time.
So do you have gold in your personal portfolio then, if I may ask?
Yes, I have some gold. I'm listening to the expert, and they're saying, you need to have a kind of a portfolio of 25% gold, 25% cash, 25% real estate, and 25% on the stock market. So my goal is to try to achieve that. I believe it's very conservative, knowing that the time in a couple of months and years can be very difficult with that stagflation.
Yeah, well, 25% gold, that's a pretty sizable chunk of a portfolio there.
But I don't have that right now.
Okay, all right. Well, let's now focus on the role of CBDCs, Central Bank Digital Currencies, which are in fact gaining traction. According to the Atlantic Council CBDC tracker, 105 countries are now exploring a CBDC. 50 countries are in an advanced stage of exploration. Canada is ahead of the United States here and is actively developing a central bank digital currency. Now, we've had two former Bank of Canada governors here on Kitco News, Stephen Poloz and David Dodge, and they've spoken favorably about this development. They claim that CBDCs will reduce transaction costs and allow central banks to engage in a more targeted monetary policy. Now, of course, on the flip side of that, there are concerns which I share, that CBDCs can become the ultimate in authoritarian control, and that government will know every transaction you'll make and will also have the power to shut down an individual or a company out of the system if the government does not agree with the policies or actions of that individual or company, for example, and that it's a very efficient way to force people into compliance. Now, I know you're not a big fan of CBDCs, so I'd like for you to explain why and whether you think that CBDCs are, in fact, inevitable.
Yeah, first, you said that, yes, in Canada, the Department of Finance and the Bank of Canada are working on a plan to develop central bank digital currency. Actually, at our last federal budget, the federal government spent $17 million to be sure that they will be ready in 3 years for that central bank digital currency. So the position of our party and my position, we are against that. We believe that it would be another way to control what we are doing, to control all our spending and our bank accounts. And it's another way. It's like being a totalitarian country. We don't want that, and we don't need it also. That's important because you have debit cards, you have credit cards, and you can have transaction online and very efficiently with that system. We don't need to have a system that the government will use to control you. So I believe that in the next couple of months, the biggest challenge for our society in US and in Canada will be privacy. And that will be an important fight. And I'm fighting for people to have their privacy respected by totalitarian governments.
Maxime, we saw governments utilize excessive control with COVID restrictions, with lockdowns. In Canada, many people were surprised to see the Trudeau administration's response to the trucker protests. I will put it out there. I personally am very terrified of a central bank digital currency. Is there anything you can say to allay my concerns about it? Or paint me the picture of what you think would happen if CBDCs are adopted widely mainstream around the globe?
I believe that it can be another kind of a revolution, a peaceful, quiet revolution. People, I don't believe that they will buy that. You know what happened in Canada when the Trudeau government decided to put in force the Emergencies Act to freeze bank accounts people who gave money to the truckers. That was, you don't do that in a democratic system. And Trudeau did it, and that was only to control. And I believe that if that happened in Canada or in other country, I hope that the population will say, no, I don't want that. Like a little bit the COVID-19 restrictions. When I was fighting for more freedom in March 2020, if we had 4% of the population on our side, that was the maximum. But right now, they just did a poll in my own province in Quebec last weekend, and 69% of vaccinated people said that they won't take the third shot or the fourth shot. So I believe that we were able to shift the public opinion. And if they are imposing a central bank digital currency, I believe that people will wake up, and that I hope they won't be able to do it. But you can count on us to be sure that it won't happen in Canada. We'll do everything to stop that.
So it's not necessarily inevitable.
No, I think they will try, but I believe that if we wake up, if we have more people that understand that privacy is important, I believe that it may be difficult for them to implement that. We'll see. But it depends on us.
Well, Maxime, it's not just about privacy. It's not just about the government knowing every transaction that you make. There's also concern that people will impose restrictions on themselves out of concern of being canceled out of a monetary system. We see a lot of that happening in media and cancel culture, and people self-censoring to a large degree what they put out in the public via social media. And there's concern that people will be very worried that the government will be able to remove them from the monetary system by cutting their access to CBDCs, that it allows greater governmental control, and that in itself will force greater compliance on the population, on individuals. What are your thoughts there?
You have a point there, Michelle. I believe that can happen. But for me, we must inform the population about that. And as a political party, that's what we are doing. And for me, there's no advantage for that. There's no upside. It's all downside. And we don't need it. So that's why we are doing that fight. And you're absolutely right about what you just said. I want people to be free to decide what they want to do. I want them to have cash if they want to pay in cash or by debit cards. And it's, that's their choice. Then that must be their choice. We want people to be able to control their own life without government intervention. And a big government intervention is that central bank digital currency.